The haunting of room 104. You never think it'll happen to you. I didn't anyway. When you hear about hauntings or ghost stories, it's always someone else, someone gullible or looking for attention. But now, every time I close my eyes, I see it. Every time I try to tell myself it wasn't real, my gut twists, reminding me that it was. Room 104 doesn't let you forget. It started innocently enough. I was traveling for work, a 2-day conference in a city I'd never been to. The hotel wasn't much to write home about. Mid-range, clean enough, but with that faint smell of stale carpet and industrial cleaning supplies. I was exhausted, having spent hours on the road. So when the woman at the front desk handed me the key card and muttered, "Room 104, I didn't think twice. The room was small but comfortable. A single queen bed, a desk, and a TV mounted on the wall. The kind of place where you toss your suitcase in the corner, check your emails, and crash. I did just that. Showered, set the thermostat to a cool 68 degrees, and collapsed onto the bed. It started around 1 a.m. At first I thought it was a dream, a soft whisper like someone murmuring just out of earshot. I stirred, half asleep, straining to hear. The sound stopped. Groggy, I assumed it was my imagination and rolled over. But then it came again, clearer this time, a faint, sibilant voice that seemed to slide from the walls. I sat up in bed, my pulse quickening. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse, uncertain. Nothing. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight, and scanned the room. Shadows stretched across the corners, the pale light from the window casting jagged patterns on the walls. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just the exhaustion playing tricks. But as I settled back into bed, I felt it. A chill. Not the kind you get when the AC kicks in, but an icy draft that seemed to creep under my skin. My breath fogged the air, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, trying to shake the sense that something was watching. The whispers came again, louder now, distinct. "Leave." My stomach's twisted. I scrambled for the lamp on the bedside table, fumbling with the switch. The bulb flickered to life, casting a dim yellow glow over the room. That's when I saw it. In the far corner, near the closet, stood a figure. It wasn't solid, not entirely. A shadow, darker than the room itself, tall and gaunt, with edges that seemed to blur and ripple like smoke. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I froze. My heart thundered in my chest, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. My limbs felt heavy, as if the weight of that thing's presence was pinning me to the bed. Then it moved. It didn't walk. More like it glided, a jagged, jerky motion that defied logic. It came closer, its form growing more defined. I could make out the contours of a face, twisted and malformed, its eyes like empty voids that bored into me. And then it was gone. Just gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The whispers didn't return, but the cold lingered, pressing against my skin like a damp shroud. By morning I felt like a shell of myself, my nerves frayed, my thoughts scattered. I went to the front desk, desperate for answers. The clerk, a young guy with tired eyes, seemed hesitant when I mentioned room 104. His expression darkened, and he leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're not the first," he said. "That room, people say it's cursed. Some won't even go in there. They hear things, see things." I asked him what he meant, and he hesitated before telling me about the couple. Newlyweds, checked into room 104 a few years back. The husband woke up to find his wife screaming, clawing at the air as if something was holding her down. She swore she saw a dark figure, a shadow that tried to suffocate her. They left in the middle of the night, the clerk said, never came back. I demanded to know why the hotel still rented the room out. His answer was chilling in its simplicity. Some things don't stay locked up, no matter what we do. I checked out that afternoon. My boss wasn't happy when I told him I'd miss the rest of the conference, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay another night in that place, not with the whispers still echoing in my mind. But here's the thing. Room 104 didn't let me leave unscathed. The first night back in my own bed, I woke up freezing. My breath fogged the air, and I could have sworn I heard it again, a whisper, "Leave." Now every night, I dread falling asleep. Every creak of the house, every shadow that flickers in the corner of my eye, feels like it's watching, waiting. I thought leaving that room would be the end of it. But room 104 doesn't just haunt you, it follows you. The abandoned asylum. I didn't set out to become a ghost hunter. If anything, I thought the whole concept was absurd, a hobby for thrill seekers who watch too many horror movies. But life has a way of leading you places you never intended to go. For me, it was the loss of my brother, Danny. Danny was obsessed with the paranormal. He believed in ghosts, spirits, and all the things that go bump in the night. He was always chasing after the next haunted spot, convinced he'd find proof of something beyond this world. When he disappeared 3 years ago while investigating the infamous Hawthorne Asylum, I couldn't rest. I had to know what happened to him. So on a cold October night, armed with his old equipment and a resolve I didn't quite believe in, I set out for the asylum. Hawthorne Asylum sat at the edge of a forgotten town, its crumbling facade barely visible through the dense fog that cloaked the surrounding forest. The building loomed like a dark sentinel, its shattered windows and sagging roofline hinting at decades of neglect. Locals avoided the place like the plague. Their stories, of shadows that moved on their own, of screams heard in the dead of night, were enough to keep even the bravest at bay. Not me, not anymore. I parked my car at the rusted gate and hesitated, gripping Danny's camera like a talisman. "Let's find you," I whispered. The air grew colder as I approached the asylum, each step crunching on the overgrown gravel path. My flashlight beam sliced through the mist, revealing the massive double doors. They hung ajar, as if inviting me inside. The moment I stepped through, the atmosphere changed. It was like stepping into a vacuum. Sound ceased, and the air grew dense, almost tangible. The smell hit me next, a mix of mildew, decay, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something metallic. "Danny?" I called, my voice barely louder than a whisper. Nothing. The asylum's main hall was a cathedral of neglect. Peeling wallpaper, rusted gurneys, and broken furniture littered the space. My footsteps echoed, unnatural in the oppressive silence. I checked the camera. It was rolling, its night vision bathing the scene in an eerie green glow. I ventured deeper into the maze of corridors. The first sign of something unusual came quickly, a cold spot that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just cold, it was frigid, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and then I heard it, a faint whisper. I spun around, the flashlight darting across the empty hallway. "Hello?" The whisper came again, clearer this time. A single word, "Leave." I should have listened. Instead, I pressed on, heart pounding. The corridor ended in a staircase leading down. Danny's notes had mentioned the basement, a place locals called the Pit. If he had gone anywhere, it would be there. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step reverberating like a drum beat. The basement was worse than the upper levels, darker, damper, and far colder. The smell of metal intensified. Blood, I realized. The faint scent of old blood. I swept the flashlight around and froze. Scrawled across the walls in what looked like dried blood were words. Fragments of sentences, desperate pleas. Help me. No escape. Why won't they stop? Something moved in the corner of my eye. I turned the camera, catching a glimpse of a shadow darting across the far end of the hall. Not just a shadow, a figure. I followed. The corridor narrowed, leading to a heavy door. It was slightly ajar, and from beyond it, I heard humming. I swallowed hard, gripping the door's edge, and pushed it open. The room beyond was large, lined with rusted medical equipment and empty bed frames. In the center stood a woman, or what had once been a woman. Her back was to me, her long matted hair hanging in clumps. She wore a tattered hospital gown, her emaciated frame trembling as she swayed back and forth. She was the source of the humming, the melody hauntingly familiar, a lullaby Danny's mother used to sing to us. "Danny?" My voice cracked. She stopped humming. Slowly she turned. Her face, if you could call it that, was a grotesque mask of anguish. Her jaw hung slack, her mouth stretched far too wide, as if frozen mid-scream. Her eyes burned with a pale blue light. I stumbled back, tripping over debris and landing hard. The camera clattered to the floor. She moved toward me, her steps unnaturally smooth, as though she weren't walking but gliding. The humming resumed, louder, more discordant. I scrambled to my feet, fumbling for the camera, and then she spoke, her voice layered, as though a dozen others were speaking through her. "He's here." "Where?" I shouted. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised a skeletal hand and pointed to a door on the far wall. I didn't think. I ran. The door led to another corridor, this one lined with small, windowless cells. Solitary confinement. The air was heavy here, suffocating. I called Danny's name, my voice echoing back like a taunt. At the end of the hall I found it. A single cell, its door ajar. Inside, scratched into the concrete floor, was a name, Danny, and then a whisper, right next to my ear, "Help me." I turned, but no one was there. The cold intensified, seeping into my bones. The camera beeped, its battery suddenly drained. In the green glow of the dying night vision, I saw them, figures, dozens of them, crowding the corridor, pale, translucent, their faces twisted in torment. They moved closer, their mouths opening in unison. The scream that followed wasn't just sound. It was a force, a wave of despair that sent me sprawling. I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was outside, the asylum looming behind me. My car keys were in my hand, though I didn't remember grabbing them. I never found Danny. But sometimes, late at night, I hear that lullaby, and I know he's still there, trapped with the others, waiting. The mysterious disappearance. In the woods. A survivor's tale. I never thought the woods I loved could betray me. It started like any other trek, a brisk autumn morning, the kind where the air is crisp enough to sting your lungs, and the forest glows in amber and crimson hues. I had planned this solo hike for weeks, mapping every trail, packing every essential. I wasn't reckless. I was careful, experienced. I'd done this a dozen times before. But something felt off as soon as I stepped into the tree line. The forest was too quiet. Normally the woods hum with life, chirping birds, rustling squirrels. But today, it was as if the entire wilderness held its breath. I shook it off, chalking it up to the season or the weather. It wasn't until later that I realized the silence wasn't natural. By the time the sun started sinking, I'd veered off the marked trail, chasing what I thought was a shortcut. The dense undergrowth swallowed the path, and soon I couldn't tell where the trail ended and the wild began. A sense of unease crept in, prickling the back of my neck. I told myself to stay calm. I wasn't far from familiar ground. With my compass and map, I could find my way back. But when I pulled the compass from my pack, the needle spun wildly, refusing to settle. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the growing sense that I wasn't alone. The shadows lengthened, and the woods came alive in the darkness. At first, it was subtle, a crunch of leaves behind me, the snap of a twig. Probably an animal, I thought. Then, as the light faded, I began to see things, shapes moving between the trees, just on the edge of my vision. I called out, a single, nervous, "Hello?" and the sound was swallowed whole. No echo, no response, just silence, deeper and darker than before. My flashlight's beam seemed to bend in the fog, as though the forest itself was fighting to stay hidden. I tried to retrace my steps, but the forest had transformed into a labyrinth. Familiar landmarks looked strange, twisted. The towering oaks loomed like giants, their gnarled branches reaching for me. I turned in circles, heart pounding, until the thought struck me. What if I wasn't lost? What if something wanted me to be here? Hours passed. The cold seeped through my jacket, biting into my skin. The fog thickened, muffling sound, muting light. My legs burned from trudging through uneven ground, and my throat was raw from yelling into the void. But I wasn't alone anymore. I knew that much. I heard it first, a low, guttural sound, almost a growl, coming from somewhere in the mist. Then came the whispers, soft and unintelligible, circling me like predators. I spun around, shining my flashlight wildly, catching glimpses of movement, a flash of white, the glint of eyes, and always that shape. A tall, shadowy figure that seemed to evaporate whenever I looked directly at it. By dawn, I was delirious, stumbling over roots and rocks. Exhaustion weighed down every step, but I couldn't stop. Stopping meant I didn't want to think about what stopping might mean. I came across a clearing, a small, unnatural break in the trees. In the center stood a stone pillar, ancient and weathered, covered in strange, indecipherable carvings. Around it, the ground was scorched black, the air heavy with the metallic scent of blood. Then I saw them. Footprints. They weren't mine. Bare feet, large and misshapen, pressed deep into the earth. They circled the pillar, trailing off into the woods. I froze, every instinct screaming to turn back. But before I could move, the whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. And then I saw it. It wasn't a man, though it walked upright. Its body was emaciated, its skin pale and stretched thin over sharp bones. Its face, or what should have been its face, was blank, featureless except for two hollow pits where eyes should be. It moved toward me, slow and deliberate, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. Days. The forest was endless, a twisting, suffocating maze. The thing was always behind me, its footsteps impossibly light, but never far. My supplies ran out, my strength faded, and still I ran, driven by pure, animal fear. Eventually I collapsed. I couldn't run anymore. My body gave out, and the darkness took me. When I woke, I was lying on the edge of the woods, my body bruised and battered, my clothes shredded. A search party found me, family, friends, and local authorities. They said I'd been missing for 2 weeks. I tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed me. They said it was hypothermia, dehydration, a hallucination caused by fear. But I know what I saw. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers again, soft at first, then louder, circling my home like they did in the woods. I don't go hiking anymore. I barely leave the house, because I know it's still out there, waiting.